This series explores games from role-playing hobbies history, examining their pros and cons, taking a look at what can be recommended if you wish to give a game a go. This time out, we're looking at a somewhat new game, but built on aspects of my childhood that I've personally been trying to shoehorn into tabletop for some time. We're going to crack open the Elite Dangerous role-playing game. Elite, as noted in the introduction, is something that was very much a part of my childhood. During the 1980s, home computing was a thing on a par with the PlayStations and Xboxes of today. I mean, other than back then you had a keyboard and a built-in programming language, so you could, and we did, write your own games, rather than gawp at someone else's movie-budget wow factor creation. But that's by the by. And it's not like we didn't also buy games to play on our primitive, by today's standards, machines. From Pong clones to Defender, Space Invaders, Q*bert, Breakout and Chucky Egg, we all had all sorts of lo-fi graphic offerings to amuse us on our TV screens. Yes, TV screens. Most of the home computers of the day plugged into a TV aerial socket. Among the section of my own peer group, one game arrived in 1984 that was, if the term existed back then, our water cooler thing. I mean, the term might have existed, we just had no clue about it, or what a water cooler was. Anyway, I digress. The game that captured us was, as you might have guessed from the title of this video, Elite, written by then university students David Brabham and Ian Bell. We all had diverse machines back then. Although the family machine that we had was a TI-99 4A, we also adopted a BBC Model B through my father's company. Among my friends was a mixture of Electrons, ZX Spectrums, Commodores and others, but Elite was fairly ubiquitous amongst them. We played it, we compared notes. Cooperative online play wasn't really a thing back then. Elite certainly didn't have it. We raced each other to try and attain Elite rating first. We spent a fair amount of time playing this one game. The attractions of it were many. It was one of the first games where it felt like that you were the in-game protagonist, rather than just the joystick controller for a model spaceship shooting up the bad aliens. You couldn't see your spaceship, just the view from the window. It was one of the first games to have no absolute endpoint. You could just keep going. It was pretty open in terms of how you wanted to play the game. Merchant, bounty hunter, pirate, or a combination of the three, all carried their own risks and rewards, but none of them was specifically written into the game via character class options or scripted storylines. You made your own story up as you went along. For me, there was also the traveller element. That is, a lot of what you were presented within the Elite game felt very, very much like the Traveller role-playing game. The manner in which world data was presented could easily have been boiled down to Traveller Universal world profiles. The trading system felt very familiar. To me, when playing Elite, I was effectively playing Traveller. But if you're not familiar with Elite, what was it? Well, it was a first-person, three-dimensional space flight simulator, with a trading element to it where you attempted to buy low at one planet and sell high at the next, and combat that let you fight off pirates. The more lawless a star system was, the higher the chance that such pirates could come knocking, or attack other merchant vessels in order to recover their cargo to sell yourself. Killing pirates earned you bounty. If you got good enough at the dogfighting in space, you could turn that skill into a profit. The graphics were minimal, being line-drawn polygons, wireframes, at first, with later iterations filling in the shapes and adding more colour. As the game was ported onto different computer platforms from its BBC origin, more tweaks were added. This meant that each iteration was slightly different than the others, for one reason or another, and according to who did the port and what access they had to the original's code. But this added to the water cooler conversations, as each of us was essentially attempting to carve out a living and exploring through our own different galaxies within the game. By the time the first major sequel to Elite was released, Frontier, in 1993, my home computing had moved onto an Amiga A1200. But gaming within the Elite universe via Frontier continued, and if anything became even more Traveller-like. Now there were missions, patrons with background stories to transport from place to place, enemies to assassinate, opposing governments to work for. All of this alongside the traditional activities of trader, pirate and bounty hunter. More story was added to the game in 1995 with the release of First Encounters. Unfortunately, buggy and incomplete on release, it was eventually fixed and was an even prettier version to play. This release included a background involving the alien Thargoids, mysterious beings that had appeared in previous versions of Elite, usually as an annoyance during hyperspace travel. Within First Encounters, they were actually doing something, and as a player, you could also do something about them. Support for First Encounters ended in lawsuits and bitterness, and all pretty much went quiet on the Elite front for around the end of the 1990s. Until, in 2012, Frontier Developments launched a Kickstarter for a new version of Elite, primarily an online, multiplayer, shared universe game called Elite Dangerous. The Kickstarter was successful and the game was finally released in 2014. But did I get involved in the Kickstarter or the game? Simple answer, no. I followed both Kickstarter and the development of the game, but I went nowhere near getting involved in playing it. Simple reason, one of time. I knew how much I had sunk into the previous 3 iterations of the game, and this new one just looked gorgeous. The gameplay looked fantastic, the graphics stunning, and the whole thing just, well, I had become older and sort of wiser over the intervening years, and I could well see Elite Dangerous eating chunks of my time that I needed for many, many other things, bringing up children for one thing. So let's pause on the computer game front there for the mo and wind back to what I was saying earlier about Elite feeling like Traveller. One of the major elements of Traveller, and one of the things that you can do when playing the game as a solo effort, is trade. You buy goods at one planet, using the planet's data to generate what is available and how much of it is available for. You then travel to the next planet and determine sale price for the goods that you are carrying, pay for fuel and maintenance and so on. The goal is to speculate against each planet's statistics in order to engage in a buy low, sell high trade. Establishing personal trade routes in this fashion can lead to amassing a good fortune. On to Elite. A big part of Elite is to buy goods at one planet from the planet's list of available trade items and sell them at a destination planet, using each planet's trade lists and characteristics to speculate and engage in a buy low, sell high trade. So, well, yes, almost exactly like Traveller, at least the trading elements of the game. Now, I'm not suggesting Brabham and Bell ripped off Traveller here, although there is plenty of evidence to suggest that they were influenced by it, regardless of denials to the contrary from some quarters. It doesn't really matter whether this was the case or not, as the game had such a wow factor capacity that our young gaming minds were instantly taken by it. We were used to two-dimensional spacecraft shooting at rows of advancing aliens, or two-dimensional spacecraft shooting at an onrush of aliens in either a vertical or horizontal plane, or two-dimensional spacecraft trying to survive a maelstrom of asteroids coming from all directions. What we weren't used to, except within our tabletop role-playing, was full 360-degree three-dimensional space in a completely open-world situation, with no remit to complete the level, and total freedom of choice within the scope of the game's limitations, to go anywhere and do anything. To viewers of generations that have grown up with immersive, multiplayer, fully rendered open-world games, this might seem a tad meh. But trust me, it was mind-blowing at the time. Not to mention that rumours that worlds with rude names were out there, which fueled our appetite for exploration. Although I never did find any, and later articles describing the development of the game noted that Brabham and Bell had scoured generated world names to ensure that no rude ones remained, even deleting an entire galaxy because they found the word arse. This was 1984. Computer games were sort of primitive back then, and it wasn't long since a band called Frankie Goes to Hollywood had a huge #1 single with Relax, a song about sex that was banned by Auntie Beeb. Note, how to make something popular in those days did involve, in part, being able to titillate a bunch of teenagers. I'm looking at you, Sally James. Well, not right now. Maybe later. Anyway, back to the game at hand. Elite. Lots of planets, lots of ships to go pirating against, Thargoids that would annoyingly rip you out of hyperspace and kick your arse. The endless search for the planet arse, boasting to your friends how rich you had become in-game, or how close to elite rank you were getting. Remember, Elite wasn't an online game. You actually had to talk to people in real life about it. Your mates at school, generally. A bit further down the line, in 1993, when I was no longer a teenager tittering about Sally James being covered in tin spaghetti, David Braben released a second version of the game. Well, OK, not quite a second version. More a 19th or something version, since the original Elite had been ported between various home computer systems, re-released as Elite Plus at one point, and otherwise tweaked during the interim. However, the actually labelled Elite 2, a game called Frontier, came out in 1993, and using my trusty old Amiga at A1200, I played that to death too. And like its predecessor, it was similarly mind-blowing. The line-drawn polygons of the original Elite game were now, drumroll, filled in. Again, that might not seem such a big deal to you spoiled modern gamers, but back then it was. Real physics was applied. We could buy different ships and upgrade them instead of being stuck with the old Cobra that we'd been flying since 1984. Many other features were introduced into the game. Missions, passengers that you could turn into fertilizer if you forgot the life support for them, factions, and ranking systems for those factions to go alongside the elite rankings. You could land on planets. The only thing really not to like was that you had to start from scratch again. No porting over your wealth from Elite into a Frontier Elite 2, but hey-ho. Experienced pilots and traders could sort that out in good enough time. And before long I was piloting my Imperial courier on behalf of fun, profit and the Empire to the high echelons of space society. And for those times I needed to try something different. I would back up my main save and go and buy a Panther or some such. Try out something different, a different way of playing, a different neck of the stellar woods to explore. The best part of the game, no sodding Thargoids. Although that changed with the release of Frontier First Encounters. First Encounters expanded on the polygonal filling in by using textures, and additionally expanded many of Frontier's functionalities and possibilities. It also introduced a huge number of bugs, but, well, they eventually got sorted out. First Encounters, released in 1995, was pretty to look at. Now the Thargoids were back. Bloody things. But at least there was an interesting story in missions to follow with them, instead of just randomly pulling you out to jump and kicking you in the teeth. Besides, I think at the time I was getting elite fatigue, and just around the corner was another game that would wow me and absorb my computer game time for a good few years. The bloodthirsty texture fest that was Quake. Following First Encounters, all went somewhat quiet on the Elite front, with Frontier Developments producing a number of other games in the interim. But Elite was never far from the company's mind, and in 2012, the almost inevitable happened. A Kickstarter was launched by Frontier to assist the development and release of a fourth instalment in the franchise. The fourth instalment was Elite Dangerous and is still going today, with Odyssey being the latest in a line of expansions, and the game itself being regularly updated. It's an open galaxy, mass multiplayer iteration of the game, with utterly gorgeous graphics along with all of the crunchy Elite stuff I loved as a kid, and more. But I've never played it. Why? Simply because, as I said before, I remember just how much of my time those early iterations of Elite swallowed. With Elite Dangerous arriving when I was in my 40s, now with family, mortgage and everything else that apparently makes you officially an adult, there is no way that I could, in all wisdom, go anywhere near it. But enter Spidermind Games. You see, one leisure activity I do regularly read, dissect, dissemble, experiment with and do is to play role-playing games. In the past, given my perception of Elite as related to Traveller, it may be of no surprise that I have attempted to tinker with the Traveller rules to model Elite. Those tinkerings have never really amounted to much, other than sketched out ship specs and maps based on the poster that came with Frontier. But in 2017, a Kickstarter arrived in my feeds outlining a licensed role-playing game based on the Elite Dangerous game. Here, I thought, would be all of the material that I would need to finally sort out my Traveller Elite project, so I backed it. I'm right there, in the backer's credits of the core rulebook. Don't look for Bully Muffin. For those of you that are new here, that is a pseudonym for my solo musical projects. The Kickstarter was successful. The Kickstarter was subject to legal challenges by some random that had inherited Ian Bell's claims to Elite. Those claims were refuted, the Kickstarter got going again. It was one of those bloody messes of a soap opera whose premise had been resolved long, long ago, but someone felt that there was a buck or two to be made. Fortunately, the Spidermind crew held on to their resolve, and a nice, shiny Elite role-playing game book made its way to me. And what I found was that, rather than providing source for me to plunder for my age-old dream of bringing Elite to Traveller, I'm actually quite good at porting between different game systems. The system put together by Oliver Holm and company was actually very good. No fuss, easy to pick up and play, and, importantly, a good vehicle for recapturing those long-gone evenings staring at an old black-and-white line renditions of spaceships as I piloted my Cobra via the keys of our family BBC Model B. Yes, I know the Elite Dangerous RPG builds on the computer game of the same name, but if you ignore the fact that the Imperial Courier looks nothing like the Imperial Courier I flew back in my 20s, the spirit of Elite is absolutely baked into the game. 4 supplements, military, espionage, super traders and exploration, were released at the same time through the Kickstarter. These expand on the background options available for characters, add a few new rules covering their particular niches, and describe new ships, equipment and challenges. These volumes are still available from Spidermind, Modifius, who partnered with Spidermind to bring the game to fruition, and DriveThruRPG. For me, the Elite Dangerous RPG lets me, in some small way, enjoy the expanse of the Elite Dangerous computer game from the safety of a role-playing game. Let the young experience the galaxy through their computer monitors, while this old curmudgeon can guide folks through the stars from the comfort of a Game Master's screen. The Elite Dangerous RPG uses a simple D10 core mechanic. That is, to determine the success or failure of a given action, players roll a 10-sided die, add modifiers, and try to equal or exceed a target number set by the Games Master or the rules. This core mechanic is used across the board, from flying spaceships to firing weapons, to hacking into computer systems, to bluffing out of tricky social situations. The basic modifier to rolls come from a character's skills. There are no traditional ability scores, strength, dexterity, intelligence and the like. Instead, it is all about the skills. Character generation is pretty easy and quick. A character chooses or randomly rolls 4 background options. Each background option provides a set of adjustments to skills, which increase the base starting value of 10 that all characters possess in all skills. For example, the mercenary background provides dodge plus 20, fighting plus 10, heavy weapons plus 20, kinetic weapons plus 10, tactics plus 10, and vehicle weapons plus 10. That background also provides the character with the tough enhancement, which increases the character's capability for taking damage. Not every background option provides enhancements. All characters gain a 5th background option, trained pilot, for free. Characters also gain the stuff which heroes are made from, Karma abilities. These represent luck, special abilities and heroic moves. Karma capabilities cost Karma points to use, and these are regained at a rate of 1 per the equivalent of a night's rest. An example Karma ability is Incoming. For the cost of 3 Karma points, you can move your character and those adjacent to them outside a fatal area of an explosion. At the start of the game, characters choose 3 Karma capabilities and have 10 Karma points. Characters are limited to the maximum skill that they can possess by their rank. This is drawn from the video game rank system. Harmless, mostly harmless, and novice at the low end, to dangerous, deadly, and elite at the top. Novice characters are capped at a skill of 40, while elite characters are capped at 100. Rank also limits the number of karma capabilities and karma points: novice 3 and 10, elite 11 and 18. And a character's endurance, essentially the damage a character can take before dropping unconscious. Characters die when reaching a negative temporary endurance equal to half their base endurance. Endurance starts at 20 for novices and goes to 60 for elite characters, subject, of course, to enhancements such as tough. The tens score of a skill provides the bonus used when the skill is used. For example, a skill of 38 provides a +3 bonus. Skills are improved during play on a first-use basis. During an adventure, the first time a character uses a skill, they can put a tick by it. At the end of an adventure, each skill with a tick is improved by 1 point. Rank is improved by earning rank points. Each time an enemy is defeated, and each time a skill is used that advances the course of the adventure, a character gains a rank point. Earn enough rank points, and rank is improved, with all the benefits in increased skill caps, karma capabilities and points, and endurance that comes from it. Characters have 3 calculated bonuses that are used mainly during combat: dodge, parry and tactics. Once skills have been set, these are calculated. Dodge is equal to dodge skill, and parry is equal to the parry skill, and, unsurprisingly, tactics is equal to tactics skill. Combat uses that same core D10 mechanic. To start with, initiative is determined by combatants making tactics checks. Highest goes first, lowest goes last. Each turn, a character can move 10 metres and take an action, which may be move another 10 metres. Attacking with ranged weapons carries a target number dependent on the weapon and the range of the attack. For example, attacking with a shotgun at 12 metres is medium range and uses a target of 7. Melee is similar, except that the target numbers are set by the weapon's finesse, as range obviously isn't a factor. Attacking with a sword carries a finesse of 4. To this target number is added the target's chosen defence form for the incoming attack, parrying or dodging, based on the parry and dodge skills. From there, roll 1d10, add the relevant skill, and a result equal to or greater than the final target number results in a hit. Roll damage for the weapon used. Some weapons are burst weapons. These have a base damage plus an additional 1d10 damage per number over the target. They can be very lethal in the hands of characters with high skill bonuses. Space and combat vehicle is handled in much the same basic way. Target numbers to hit a ship are equal to a ship's agility rating plus the pilot's spaceship pilot skill bonus. Bonuses to hit against a target come from the ship's weapon accuracy plus spaceship weapon skill bonus. Damage is taken from the target ship's shields and hull and potentially damage a ship's equipment. This is similarly reflected in vehicle combat. Both space and vehicle combat abstract range into 2 categories: up close and at a distance. These ranges present a set of actions that can be performed. From a movement perspective, a ship up close can attempt to disengage, that is, move to at distance, and a ship at distance can attempt to completely get out of dodge with the flee action. Other actions possible include strafing, passing, sniping, dogfighting, and launching broadside attacks. This style of handling combat gets away from some of the more complex systems out there for handling spaceship combat that can often feel somewhat board game or war game-like. Here, the action is fast-paced and flowing, which really does capture the spirit of the video game, where, quite often, you didn't have much of a realisation of where everything actually was as you try to outturn your enemy, get him in your sights and blow him out of space. The time to figure out where the fight has left you is very much something for after the battle. The core rulebook also includes rules for trading, creating spaceships and vehicles, and detailing star systems, all capturing the flavour of the video game and serving the role-playing game itself as a cinematic or a video game tabletop simulator, rather than getting bogged down with technological and scientific details. And that's about it. The supplements add some additional rules. Military adds in military ranks for Empire and Federation. Traders builds on the trade system. Exploration adds more options to the star system generation elements. And all of them provide new equipment, vehicle and ship options. From a Games Master's perspective, the core rules also include mission building tools and statistics for potential foes. And these are likewise built on with the supplements. The core rulebook is the only essential and will give you everything that you need to play the game. If you want to add more specifics in, then the supplement books are worth picking up. They are inexpensive and are useful tools for Games Masters, even if you aren't going to run a game within their subject sphere of the supplement at hand. I would also suggest players of the Elite RPG, or wanting to use the Elite setting, to check out edsm.net for system information. It's not quite Traveller Map, but it's a pretty good tool. Also, frontierastro.co.uk, which is simply the best hive of knowledge for older Elite games, and includes many downloads that will be helpful to a Games Master running an Elite Dangerous RPG campaign, or, if like me, you just want a trip down memory lane. The Elite Dangerous RPG exists to simulate the Elite video game experience around the tabletop. That is all. It is not meant to be an accurate projection of science and technology, or is it pretending to be a complete all-factors-covered science fiction game. In this regard, players who prefer more crunch with their science fiction would be better off served by games such as Traveller and Space Master. However, for a cinematic experience, it's perfect. The rules are very simple, and the game therefore lends itself well to newcomers to the role-playing game hobby. In my opinion, it far outstrips, in its abstract cinematic approach, games such as Fantasy Flight's Star Wars offering. If you want to have fun around the table shouting pew 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 at each other, this game really does work very well indeed. Elite, for me, is part of my childhood. Elite Dangerous is that universe in which decades younger me flew around in, writ large. The Elite Dangerous RPG brings it to the tabletop, in a compact, to-the-point, abstract, cinematic science fiction game that does a really good job at setting out what it was designed to do.